Hey, so this is a game that I played pretty darn recently here. Yeah, I played them with the black pieces, and we can get into it. So this is also the first video on this channel. I'm going to just be analyzing this game in its full depth. I got a 77% accuracy, pretty bad, and a 1950 estimated rating. Now let's get into it. So my opponent starts off the game with the move c4, which is pretty darn interesting. This is the English opening. I hate the English. It's my least favorite opening. I have practically nothing against it, so I just try to play random stuff. I go e5, which I know is theory. Knight f3, knight c3, pardon. Knight f6, g3. I also fianchetto my bishop. Fianchetto. I play d6, knight e2. I complete my development with OO. I go knight f6, knight c6, d4, captures, and I decide here that now is the time to complicate everything with the move d5, which sacrifices a pawn in the center of the board. And in all honesty, I thought that this was going to be pretty okay after knight takes, bishop takes. I would go bishop here. But again, the engine doesn't really like that. What the engine wants is for me to first, I believe, capture this. No? I don't remember. It's something over here. I believe, yes, the engine wanted me to go bishop g4 first to pin this to the queen and threaten this pawn. And this is a 0-0 position. And it's really complicated, but honestly, I shouldn't have gotten into this. Luckily, my opponent doesn't decide to call me out on my mistake and goes for the move c5, locking up the position and giving me a healthy advantage. I go rook e8, developing. Knight f4, which attacks my pawn. And here I go for another tactic, which I, again, probably should have done. I go for this knight e4 idea, which is also just horrendous, terrible, awful move. And it's terrible and awful because I believe this move, and against this I was thinking here, and I'm going to win this pawn back if I can move the pieces properly, which I can't. I'm going to win this pawn back. It's going to be great and awesome, wonderful, and I might have an advantage. Fortunately, for some reason, I didn't even consider the move b takes, which is very obvious, and I would just be losing a pawn. But whatever the case, he takes my knight, captures. He goes d5. I go up like this, knight b4, which targets this pawn and does a decent job here. He goes a3. I bring my knight back, attacking the pawn on c5. And he goes here, and I don't think he meant to do this, but he loses the pawn on b2, which I graciously accept and go into this type of line where even though I'm up a pawn, the position is 0-0 because of this massive counterplay here. Incredible counterplay. He goes rook a2, bishop back to g7. I'm already losing. Again. Rook g2. Bishop d7. I'm just trying to get my pieces out. This move is like pretty much always on the cards. This is a very hard move to play. To calculate for both sides, I would probably go back to c8 or something. It's hard. So I go bishop d7. Queen e2, and I'm really trying to play c6 myself. So first I go knight b8, because if I play c6 in the previous position, if I play c6 here, then captures would hang the knight in the corner, and I can't take with my, let me just put this on the board. See, hang knight, and I can't take that pawn with my bishop. If my computer would load, please. Can't take that pawn with my bishop, because of course that would drop the queen. So I go knight b8, preparing the c6 move. Queen c4. I go queen e7, so that my queen wouldn't be pinned. So my bishop wouldn't be pinned to my queen at the end of this. And that would, of course, not be very awesome. d6, best move, captures, captures. Queen e5, getting my queen out of the way. Bishop here, and I'm already thinking of like different tactics with the move. Bishop e5, which is a skewer, but more or less it's just kind of a funny little thing there. But instead I just realized he hangs the pawn on d6, so I grab it, and then my opponent gets this amazing move, this bishop takes g7 move, which hangs the rook. So I of course take the rook, but the reason why it's winning is just so convoluted. It's winning because of bishop c3, and after my queen moves, he just gets this massive attack over here. He gets massive attack on my pieces, and my king over here, with his rook coming to play, with moves like this. Not best move, maybe captures the pawn or something. And just trust me, there's wild complications here, and I'm actually just worse, and I have to thread very, very carefully if I want to equalize here. But instead, that's really, really hard to find, so he goes bishop h6, and the game is pretty much over. I put my queen on b2. I put my queen on b2 just to make sure that his queen can't get over here in these squares and start trying to mate me. You know, my arrows are pretty awful, but don't want that to happen. He goes rook e1. I defend my pawn in the center. He captures, 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 and this is just a simple fork of the rook and the king. Moves there, captures, captures. And the last little thing of the game, he goes knight d5, which threatens a fork here, which threatens to trap the rook over here. And if I try to stop a lot of stuff, like, and he also has moves of knight e7, which are just a little complicated. I go for rook c4, which I think is just the best move, because it stops the knight c7 attack, and knight f6 doesn't actually threaten my rook anymore. So I think that's pretty good. Goes a4, knight c6, knight f6, and my opponent resigns here, where I'm up 8 points of material with a completely dominant position, and the game is over. Now, if we were gonna reiterate that game, the opening honestly went pretty well until this d5 move, which I don't even know what I was thinking in all honesty. I probably should have just played rook e8. Rook e8 is just a much better move, and it's just, yeah, he like lets me off the hook here, which is just amazing. And this is just a massive blunder that I completely miss, which is just simply pawn takes. I don't know what was wrong with me. Here I think this was a good idea, this knight b4 idea, which attacks the pawn here on c5, and I think that was very, very useful there, necessary. Grabbing this pawn was very nice, but the complications here are just wild, and it's just very, very hard to consolidate. So after all this, I think I handled this idea of these d6, c6 moves pretty carefully, pretty well, with this nice idea of bringing my queen up and just winning this pawn here because he's very, very congested. And luckily for me, I was able to get my queen on this diagonal, which I think is just the best way to play. And he hangs the game, and there's not much else to really say here. And that was the game. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had some fun watching. Maybe you got some instructional content out of this. No idea, but whatever the case, yeah, good evening and good night.